Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council special meeting of Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. I now call the meeting to order. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let me ask a question. How many people from the public are expecting to speak? What we do is we'll do 3 minutes, and you can speak on the item that's on the agenda, the discussion item. Is anybody going to speak? Okay. All right. In that case, anybody on Zoom?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have one person.
Okay, so let's open up public comments. And then you all said you're not going to speak for the public in the chambers. We have somebody on Zoom. So, yeah, we'll. Oh, Brenda, well, roll call will reflect that there's everybody's here except for Councilmember Reynolds, who's going to be 10 minutes late, right?
Perfect. Thank
right,
you.
Clerk? Okay, good stuff. And so,
Cynthia McDonald, please.
Ms. McDonald, you have the floor. It's 3 minutes, and you can just speak about the item on the agenda. Thank you.
Good evening, Cynthia McDonald, Costa Mesa resident. As I wrote to you earlier, one of the links in the agenda stopped working. It's hard to comment on something that isn't available or may have changed. In addition, if we could have seen staff's presentation before making comments, I think these documents would have made more sense. With respect to the performance measures, it's difficult to fully comprehend what these mean since
Hold on. Stop talking for a second. Would you prefer to talk after the staff presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's do that. Let's give her back 3 minutes. We'll do the staff presentation. We'll open up for public comment again, and Ms. McDonald can talk at that time. That's perfectly fine. Okay? So
Thank you.
You bet. So then if we have nobody else that wants to speak now, I think the next thing we do is go to the staff presentation. So please read the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is discussion and potential action on proposed 2024 strategic plan goals and objectives tactics. Presentation by Ms. Yakar, Management Analyst.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm going to go ahead and get started and give a little brief overview.
Okay.
Alma Reyes, Deputy City Manager. Tonight before you, staff is presenting a proposed action plan for the strategic plan for 2024 with goals and objectives included for your discussion and potential action. So, over the last 5 years, the city has planned strategic plan workshops to establish long-term goals and short-term objectives that help meet those goals. And tonight, we have Assistant to the City Manager, Hadassah Jaker, that would give us a brief overview of this year's process and including our strategic plan workshop that we hosted on April. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Jaker.
Okay, Hadassah, you have the floor. Now remember, the rules here are relaxed a little bit. That's why I called you Hadassah, and you can feel free to call me John and any of these other council members by their first name if you're comfortable doing it, but you have no obligation, of course, to do that. You can call us whatever you want to call us. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Within the bounds of decency.
I'll be sure to keep that in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
So the past 5 years, we had several workshops on a near annual basis. This past April, we had our 2024 workshop where the facilitator, Ms. Kendall Flynn, prepared a SWOT analysis. We did not change our mission or our core values, but we did talk about our goals and objectives. And the draft plan is here for consideration this evening. Just to reiterate, our mission statement is unchanged and is as follows. Our core values remain unchanged. We have 6 of them. And then our goals. So we added a new goal that was to reflect Council's request for customer service, both internally and externally. And for the remainder of the presentation, I'll just kind of go over, I won't read line by line what each objective is within each goal, but as you can see, there is on the dais before you is Kendall's draft of her plan that she provided to us after the workshop, and then the attachment to the staff report was what staff worked on, taking notes from the various sticky notes that were put on the board, as well as council's comments during the workshop itself. So the first goal is to strengthen the public safety and improve the quality of life, which includes a lot of the CIP projects for public safety and many other parks CIP projects as well. The goal to recruit and retain high-quality staff. Goal to maintain and enhance the city's infrastructure, facilities, equipment, and technology. The goal to diversify, stabilize, and increase housing to reflect community needs. To achieve long-term fiscal sustainability, advance environmental sustainability and climate resiliency. And then our new goal, which was to provide outstanding customer service, both internally and externally. So the draft plan contains these various short-term and long-term objectives to help meet each of the new 7 goals. So staff is seeking council feedback and direction on the draft strategic plan to formally adopt it. The key metrics that were included as attachments because they were adopted as part of our annual budget process, similar to previous years, and any proposed changes to these metrics, if any, can be conducted in the next budget cycle or during mid-year. And in order to facilitate the proper tracking, we've included details regarding projected timelines in the staff version of the draft plan, as well as staff leads for each objective. So now we just seek your direction and your feedback regarding your objectives and goals. Thank you.
So Mayor and Council, I'll just chime in here. And so we didn't want to get into every single tactic and objective that's included in the plan. Mayor, I'll leave it to you to decide how we should go through each goal, see if there's anything here that was missed by staff from that meeting that we had at the Norma Herzog Community Center for the workshop. And then also we attached the metrics that were included in the budget, which is part of our annual budget process. And so we're just looking for feedback this evening. We do have 7 goals now. We didn't remove any of the goals. There was some conversation about either consolidating goals or reconsidering certain goals. But we left all the goals as is so that you have maximum flexibility. We added the providing outstanding customer service internally and externally goal, as Hadassah mentioned. And then we included the work plan that we currently have in place, plus any additional projects that were mentioned at the meeting. And so consistent with a strategic plan, typically the work that we are doing should fall into one of these 7 categories, unless it's statutorily required and it doesn't for some reason fit into any of these categories and it's administrative by nature. This isn't everything that we're doing for every single goal, but it is some of the more salient, some of the more high-level projects that we're engaging in over the next 12 months. We added the team lead for each of these so that we could, it's a tracking tool for me especially, and also for department heads to work with their staff on each of these different projects with estimated target dates so that we can tell you on a monthly basis whether we're on track, whether we're done, or whether a date has been revised. And so that's basically the format that we've used for this discussion this evening to facilitate your feedback. And we're available to answer any questions.
All right,
And Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
I'm sorry, this is Kim Barlow. I just wanted to let you all know I'm here. I'm not
hi.
physically there, but I'm here in case you have any questions for me.
Hi, Kim. Appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Okay. Let me think about this for a second. Why? Oh, hi, yeah. Hi, Arliss. Yeah, of course. Let's do this. What I'm trying to determine is whether I should go and get the public commenter or whether we should do questions. So why don't we hear from the public commenter and then we can do our questions. So,
Mayor, can I ask a general question?
Yeah, of course. Can you put, you gotta put your microphone on. Let me make sure it's available. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so apologies if this has already been addressed, but there's a new packet on the dais, and I don't know if that had been described, sort of how this fits into the material that was provided before the meeting.
Yes, so
That's a great
the
question.
document that says draft on it is the document that was prepared by the consultant after the strategic planning session. And so we took this document, the draft, and we incorporated the strategies and tactics that were outlined in this document, added them to the matrix that it was attached to the staff report, if you will. And then we added any other additional objectives and tactics that we're working on, consistent with what we talked about at the meeting, because we didn't have an opportunity to talk about everything that we're doing in all those categories. What wasn't included in the matrix, if you will, is the metrics that were suggested, because there was no discussion of the metrics at the strategic planning retreat. And as an executive team, we felt like we really need to do a deeper dive on the metrics, come back with some recommendations about what are the industry best practices, what it is that we can track compared to what we're capturing in the budget, and recommend some changes. I'm not entirely sure where the metrics came from that were proposed in the consultant's document. I think she was giving some examples, perhaps, of things that we could capture. But I believe that if we really wanted to do a good job on the metrics, I think that takes a little bit more work on our part, especially because I think each department, they're the experts in their fields. They'll know what are industry best practices. We can bring a combination of that to you. You could give us feedback to that. That would take more time. We didn't want to hold up the rest of the plan and you adopting the plan for the performance metrics. And then the second part of that is making sure that we have the tools to be able to capture that data. I don't want to have metrics that we don't track, so we'd have to set up tracking mechanisms to do that as well. That would be reliable and that would make sense.
Okay, so this was a document provided by the consultant and was used as an interim document to provide what's in the staff report. You
Correct.
described metrics. If there's tactics in this interim document that are not in the work plan attached to the staff report, was there purpose behind that?
I believe we tried to capture everything, although as I'm looking at these address parking minimums, I'm not sure that we included that. But I believe everything else is included. The ones that are in yellow, I believe that she had highlighted those because these were her recommendations. They may not have been on one of the stickies on the board that reflected either council feedback or department head feedback. And so I think that they established the housing division. I don't believe that that's included. That would have a significant budgetary impact probably as well, but that's why we wanted you to see this in addition to the document. But I'd say 95% of what's in the draft document is included in this larger document.
Okay, thanks. That helps me understand how to digest this.
I think there's also a description that was provided by the consultant to kind of flesh out the goals. We can add that. I didn't want to take the liberty of describing for council, your description of the goal aside from what we've already adopted in the past. And so I think that language, I think, was provided just to kind of facilitate conversation maybe and just to put a little bit more flavor around each goal that was discussed at the retreat, but wasn't anything that we had adopted or really agreed to at the retreat. So hope that helps.
Okay.
So, just to be clear, this is part of this, right? Or do you want us
Right, I would suggest
comment
that-
on this or ignore this or?
No, I think
Okay.
it's good information. I think as we go through each goal, it would be good to take a look
Reference
at,
back to that.
yeah.
All right, fair enough.
I think most of the strategies and tactics are included. And the metrics, we would recommend to hold off on that until we could really do a deeper dive on what we believe are industry best practices and good metrics. We bring those to you, you give us feedback, add, delete, et cetera. And then the other language is basically just descriptors of the goal, which we can add to this plan that's before you this evening or not. That's your call.
Okay, let's hear from the member of the public. And then we'll close public comment, then we can have our discussion. Go ahead. We'll give Ms. McDonald the floor with 3 minutes on the clock.
Okay, good evening again. Yeah, I wrote earlier that one of the links in the agenda for the strategic plan had stopped working. And, it's hard to comment on something that's not available, may have changed. I'd like to see the document that you all got, that Ms. Reynolds and Mr. Harper held up. The Brown Act, got to give it to the public. With respect to the performance measures, it's difficult to fully comprehend what those mean because there's no context. How do the PMs compare to Irvine, Santa Ana, Huntington Beach? Are they just goals and not a report card? And if it's not a report card, when do we get to see a report card? How do you know if the city's performing well if you don't have a survey that gathers data? For example, with the Costa Mesa 311 app, there's no way on the app to contact anyone if you're having difficulty with it. I submitted a code enforcement issue over a month ago, and I haven't heard boo. Not even an acknowledgement of my complaint. I wasn't offered a satisfaction survey. I have no idea who or how to contact about it. Guess what? I'd give that app a failing grade. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about Tessa from some of the public. So far, I haven't found it helpful either. As far as the goals go, they look similar to every other city, especially Santa Ana and Huntington Beach. Looking at Santa Ana's 31-page report on their 5-year strategic plan, I note how they held community workshops to gather input. Why isn't our city surveying its residents? Again, how do you know how well the city is performing, especially in terms of that goal of providing outstanding customer service if your customers can't give you satisfaction ratings? Please look at the survey the City of Laguna performs each year, as it is excellent. I ask that you add the following goals: better transparency, better engagement of and participation by the public, accountability, effectiveness, and efficiency. Those are all part of good governance, and they shouldn't be missing from our city goals. And don't forget an ethics policy. I hope the presentation is put up on the website because, staff went through it very quickly. I was able to get a screen grab of a couple of things, but that would have helped to see that earlier. It would have filled in some questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else on Zoom, Madam Clerk? Okay, so we'll close public comment. And, we've asked, this is a time when we can ask questions, we can make comments, we can do whatever we want. We're on discussion mode. So any council member that wants the floor, we'll give them the floor, and you can say whatever you want to say about this, the work product and whether it meets your expectations of what we did at the strategic planning session, and if not, what are your thoughts on that? Council?
I'll go because I
Go
always go.
Go ahead, Don.
Sure, thank you, John. First, I appreciate the effort to do KPIs, and some of them are workload indicators, some of them are performance measures. In general, and I know they're intertwined in this new document, and it's a lot of data and a lot of information, and it's so I'll give you some general comments, and then I'll maybe talk about some specifics. In general, I do appreciate the police department and the fire department giving me 3 years of data. I said something nice. 3 years of data to compare. It kind of gives me a perspective. That was really helpful. The other, and maybe the data wasn't available for the city manager's office, the finance department, Parks and Rec. Maybe it wasn't available in the same format And maybe that was a problem.
It's all included by department. It's 3 years by department. It starts with the city manager's office in attachment 2. So you should have every single
Oh, so
department.
now I'm confused. So when I look at, Lorianne, I look at the police, and I've got 2021, 2022,
Yeah, I
2023.
think go to the front.
Go to the
I think you need to
front.
move to the front.
And then when I look at city
That-
manager's office,
Yeah.
it has actual 22, 23, proposed 23, 24, and adopted 24, 25.
23, 24 hasn't finished. That'll finish June 30th. So I think they,
We say it again, the police department has 2021, 2022, 2023. I'm assuming their fiscal year ends or,
If I
I
may
think
chime
they,
in,
they
Oh,
have
sure.
different
their
criteria.
performance measures are based on a calendar year,
Okay.
where the other departments are on a fiscal.
okay. So 2023, okay, so that's fine. So, okay, 24, 25 hasn't happened yet, right? It's not done yet. So it's in the future. Police department's looking back, latest is 23. I'm not confused here about what I'm saying, I don't think. I mean, I often am confused, but I don't think this time I am. And proposed is what? Is that budgeted, proposed, suggested? What does proposed mean versus actual or adopted?
If I may, 'cause it's part of the
Sure.
budget document. The proposed is what was adopted in 23-24, what the assumption would be in the current fiscal year.
Got it. So as part of your budgeting process, you had those numbers.
Correct. So each
Okay.
department provided what they would be assuming would occur in the current fiscal year
Okay.
by June 30th.
In 2023 is what, so anyway, in 23. Okay, so you just didn't go backwards, you went forwards.
So you go
Unlike
one
the
year.
police, the
you-
police department had actual data from the prior 3 years, not including 2024. You have some partial data in the future,
Correct. So it's 3 years.
and 1
then-
year passed.
And the other departments are fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th, versus police and fire providing calendar year, which is
Okay.
January to December.
Okay, I'll say what I said at the beginning of all this. I appreciate that the police department and the fire department had actual data, that it was comparable and not proposed it was helpful. But it's okay. I'm thrilled you did it. It's a lot of data. And maybe that's part of what everybody here might be a little dizzy looking at. The other thing about every department that I'll say is you've got in this goal sheet and you've got metrics that are trying to measure different things that you're trying to accomplish. I think the metrics that you might focus on is the performance of the people within the departments. So it comes down to, each department from HR, Parks and Rec, Public Works, Police, Fire. And in those metrics, those sheets, what would be nice to see is staffing levels, hours worked, overtime hours worked, and personnel costs. And with those, you can start to measure kind of trends of where things are going, if we're efficient, if we're effective. And I'd like to see that in every department. I'd like to see a ratio of management cost at a certain level to staff costs. I'm not sure how to say the right way to the police department. Police, you have a management officers or executive group, and then you've got all these people, police officers out there in the field doing the work. What's that ratio? Is it held in check? Where I come from, my business life is, I'll pick on HR. HR, we always looked at and said, year to year, quarter to quarter, are we spending two things we tried to accomplish? And we were good with at least one. One was, what's our cost per employee for our HR department? And I could say that about accounting. I could say that about other administrative departments. So what's our HR cost, and what is our cost per employee? Because that's our customer base. That's our servicing. And then I'd either try and improve that number, or I'd look at the total budget and try and improve the total budget. And I would always challenge any organization with systems, computer systems, technology, AI, that administratively, cities and businesses have to get more efficient. And you start measuring that stuff and you get more efficient. And the last thing, or maybe not the last thing, the other thing I'd say about the KPIs is, or these, you call them performance measures, workload indicators, is look at each one and say, what can I manage differently from this? What am I trying to accomplish? And that's a little bit what I think Cynthia McDonald was pointing to. What's the context of it? Is there something I'm trying to do? I think I saw a number of payroll checks issued. Well, am I trying to issue less payroll checks or more? I can issue less by paying people once a year, or I can get rid of people. So what's the goal, I think, within that metrics? And I'd rather see fewer metrics that we manage and we push towards a goal than a lot of metrics that I just get dizzy looking at. But again, I truly appreciate you guys putting this together and putting the data in this format. John, I don't want to do this if you don't want me to, but I was going to ask some specific questions about some of the metrics. I don't want to take too much
You have the
time.
floor, take your time.
And if anybody wants to interrupt me with
no,
anything
no.
along the
Well,
line of what I said.
If they want to interrupt you, they can ask you. You have the floor, so you can do
Okay.
whatever you want.
Okay, well, it's all right. I'm just curious, it's on page 135 of the Information Technology Report, and I'm going to bounce around. Number of computers and monitors maintained, 2,700. I'm so happy to ask you a question. Computers and monitors, does that count as one or is that two?
So when it comes to a desktop setup, it's monitors, 2 monitors, a desktop.
So that counts as three?
Three.
I got it. So that makes a little more sense.
Right.
It was going crazy going.
Right.
And then in addition to that, you've got 670 mobile devices, laptops. Is that some integrated with the police force, some of that?
Yeah, that's
Gotcha.
all laptops for all departments.
Simple question. I figured it was something like that. I have some questions about the police department. And if maybe, I don't know who wants to come up and the police metrics, because this is really interesting. And because you did a great job, and I really appreciate the data here. Joyce, I understand what part 1 and part 2 crimes are. Is that kind of the sum total of the crimes that were called in? Those two numbers, 2021 shows 4,400 part 1 crimes, 7,900 part 2 crimes. I think that's a total.
Part 1 crimes are crimes against persons. Part 2 crimes are property crimes.
Understood.
So grand theft.
Understood. Is that the total crimes that you recognized or reported or acknowledged during that year?
Correct.
So, okay, so because the data, okay. So you got 12,373 crimes, and then out of all those, you made 7,800 arrests. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and then, okay, so I just want to understand that. So, an interesting number to me would be the total crimes versus what's the percentage of arrests. So I think that's about 60% rate. It seems to be consistent. You know what I'm saying? Like, does that make any sense?
It does, but there's a lot of arrests that aren't necessarily documented as a crime. So let's say a DUI, for example. We may make a lot of DUI
Okay.
arrests, but we're not going to document that on part 1 or part 2 crimes. So we could have more arrests than technically there were crimes.
Oh,
Right? So if I have somebody
Got it.
who's drunk in public, I may make that arrest, but I'm not going to document it as a theft
as a
call
crime.
or
It's not a crime.
Correct.
So what else is, so okay, okay. I think I understand. Maybe the order of this data would be, so where would the DUIs be?
They would be on the arrests. So when you're going to look at all of our misdemeanor and felony arrests, they'd be under the misdemeanors, unless they included some type of traffic accident where it turned into a felony when somebody was injured.
Okay. And so down on injury collisions, assigned hit and run case. Now, it says assigned. Why does it say assigned? What are you inferring?
Referring that's being investigated by our traffic investigator.
So that hit and run case might be a crime up in the other data?
Correct. Hit
Can
and run
be.
is a crime. And it
Okay.
could be, yeah, that is correct.
Robbery, burglary, juvenile cases, those are crimes.
Correct.
So this is just extra data. Okay.
Kind of breaks it out a little bit for you.
I understand. I think maybe if we work to organize the data a little different, it'd make a little more sense to, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm kind of lost. Adult bookings, what's that?
It's anytime an adult is booked into our jail for a crime.
Okay, so it goes into the jail. Got it. That's helpful.
A lot of times people can be cite and released out in the fields,
Okay.
They wouldn't be booked in our jail.
And citation, is that when I don't have my dog on a leash?
Yes.
That's me. Okay. I don't do that. Just so you know. I am fascinated with the fact that in 2021, there were 12,000 crimes and there's 9,800 in 2023 total. I totaled the numbers. My math might be off, Joyce, but it's close. Can you, I don't know if anybody else is interested in that, but I'm just interested in why you think that's down. What changed?
That would be difficult for me to answer.
Yeah.
I would attribute a lot of it to the fact that we started our flock program. We are mitigating, I think, a lot of crime in the city due to that. So a lot of times when people come into the city of Costa Mesa, they're driving a stolen vehicle or a vehicle that,
Well, this is 2023 data.
yeah, we implemented the flock camera system mid last year.
Was it mid last year? Is that far? It's been that long?
Yeah, we've made over 84 arrests with that system, and we have recovered over $1.1 million in vehicles.
I think it's fantastic. I kept thinking it was February of this year.
No, it's been almost a year.
Almost a year. And you got, okay. Maybe it's just a few last year, but it made a big difference. Or I don't know, maybe. You think it's because of that?
I think that's a piece. I think that is a attributing factor, but I couldn't tell you.
So you got,
Harper.
pardon me?
Can I
Yes.
just jump in?
Sure.
Isn't it true though that we do see trends over time, right? We
yeah.
see years that have down crime and years that have
Yeah.
up crime. We see a shift in the types of crime that are
Cycles.
incurred. There are cycles. I just would hesitate for us to read a ton into.
Yeah.
We deployed one system 6 months ago and now magically crime.
Oh,
is
no, it's just a attributing factor. I
Right.
do believe it's assisting us.
And would you say that the difference between, I didn't do the math, but 11,000 and 9,000 crimes is sort of within the order of magnitude of the cycles that we tend to see?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's 12,000 versus 9,800. It's like a 20% difference. I don't know if that's I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. I think.
Is that normal?
Yeah, because when I first ran for office, I looked back at the last 10 or 12 years to try to understand some of this data, and it is pretty cyclical.
So you got to go back further, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. It trended down. I'm always concerned about what's reported, and you have no way to know what's not reported.
Correct.
I know I live next door to the manager of the CVS pharmacies, a bunch of CVS pharmacies, and they just watch the stuff walk out the door, and they don't report it. They don't do anything.
That's unfortunate.
What are you going to do? You're going to call, and by the time they're gone, what do? They don't do. Yeah, I guess the other piece of data that I guess I'd like a further breakdown of the part 1, part 2 crimes, if there's any other breakdown you've got, I'd like a further breakdown, Joyce. And I don't know what to ask, other than I'm a little bit lost on what's really important. If we had part 1 crimes, I wrote down murder, rape, and assault, and hopefully we didn't have 3,600 murders. Well, any of those 3. I don't want any of those 3. So, hopefully there's 3 murders and the rest is
We have more
less.
data.
It's
We have
not
more
as
data.
bad. Probably mostly assaults, right? I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I'm hoping. So that would be nice to break that down. And telephone calls received. You got a telephone calls received 183,000. 183,000. That is extraordinary. But calls for service 126. What's the difference? Yeah.
Our call center is used for many things. We also manage our water district. They Anytime we have issues with Edison, they make those calls. So there's a lot of calls that come in that aren't necessarily a 911
Okay.
emergency.
You're taking all the 911, forgive me, I forgot that. I gotcha. Anything you want to say about this report? You like it? You hate it? What do you?
I do,
anything
I
you-
like it. I think it accurately reflects the work that's being done.
Yeah.
You can see there's a lot of good police work being done here.
Yeah, you know, I read a fair amount about police metrics before I came here, and I got really confused and how hard it is. So I'm being respectful. As much as I like metrics, how to measure a police department, how they're doing, not get confused. You know, I mean, I want to measure what our costs are, what our costs per capita are. That's why I want the payroll data and the hours and those things. I want to control overtime because that's a cost issue. But I do appreciate trying to measure crime statistics is a bit of an art, isn't it? So if there's any way we can improve this, give us more, you know, insight, it's great, but I appreciate the beginning of it. I do. I really do. That's it. I don't have anything, unless anybody else has anything for Joyce. I can chase her off, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think, John, I think that might be it.
Well, if you think of something else, let us know. You're welcome to take the
All right.
floor again and
Thank
ask
you.
questions.
I'm good.
Manuel, you have questions or comments?
I had a question for Joyce, but it might just be a general question. So when Dawn was talking about the KPIs, I ended up diving in here. I noticed that we have a higher traffic collision rate, and I was wondering if, you know, there's any trends we're seeing in PD or Public Works or any way that kind of shows why there's a higher increase in traffic collisions. I'm not sure that's for anybody, but.
Again, I couldn't tell you exactly why there's higher traffic collisions at this point. We have noticed an increase in our bicycle traffic collisions. So that's probably a contributing factor to that.
Okay, so I didn't realize. So when we show like injury traffic collisions, it's not just cars; it's also including.
It's including all injury traffic, bikes, pedestrians, vehicles.
Okay, and colloquially, I guess you'll say that the rise is due to bicycles, or not due to them, but just we're seeing more bicycles.
There are more bicycle accidents that we've noticed. That's
Okay,
correct.
that's probably a good thing for us to. Yeah, Don, after me, I think it's good for us to probably bring our ordinance for e-bikes as soon as we can. If
Yeah,
that seems to be
absolutely.
the case. Yeah.
I just your question. It's when you investigate these and you pick up a kid off the pavement or you see it up, you're asking why it happened, aren't you? I mean, you're looking. So do you have no sense of why there would be more? Are there more people on phones or more people? Is it, you know, that they're buying drinks at Cane's or whatever? I don't know. Is there some?
You know, it's interesting in looking at our statistics for this, and it's 50% vehicle issues, 50, you know, I kind of categorize vehicles and pedestrians kind of similar, and then the driver, so it's 50% on each side. The collision, primary collision factors will be bicycles on sidewalks, people on phones, people not paying attention, distracted driving generally.
Just more of it.
More people on the road now, too, so.
Is that maybe the reason?
I think so.
How do you measure more? How do we know more people on the road in Costa Mesa? How do we know that? Do we know it?
Be a Raja.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Harper, I think we're coming off the pandemic too, so I think there is more traffic now than 2021, 2022 even. So I think that's probably some of the reasons why you're seeing 2023 as a little bit of a uptick. And as sorry, the Vice Assistant Chief Joyce mentioned, when you see a reported accident, that's what you see the number there. So some of the accidents, if they have injuries, they get definitely taken a report and all that stuff. So some of the accidents or collisions, you don't take a report, and they're not reported in this number. So you'll see an uptick if there are more injury accidents and if there are
Right,
more
but I just wondered, does the flock camera system give you data on number of
No.
drive-by? No.
No.
Interesting. it records all the license plates, right?
It'll record, yeah, license plates.
But it
It'll
doesn't
me how
tell
many
you,
license plates
it doesn't
hits.
tell you how many traversed in a month?
Say that one more time?
Doesn't tell you how many went through that,
No, it
past
won't,
that
'cause
camera in a
it's-
month?
No,
It won't do that?
no,
Okay, all right.
not that I know of. It
Sorry,
has
sorry,
that
Manny.
capabilities.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you see drinks at Cane's?
I was just joking about people going to drinks. Not even drinks,
I wasn't.
alcohol drinks.
I just wasn't aware they sold drinks at
Well,
Cane's.
John, the only
I might consider going there. Okay, so
But John, the only drink is not an alcoholic drink.
Yes,
There are
of
regular
course.
drinks that you.
well, and those can be distracting too. Okay, you had the floor. Did you finish your question?
You know, I'll just continue. I think I can make a few comments and questions along the way. So, I want to talk a little bit about the recruit and retain staff. Two things that caught my attention were particularly the college summer internship and the NeoGov. Can someone explain, what those programs are, what the intent of those programs is, how they work, just general positives about those two ideas?
Yeah, so for the internship program, we've been talking a lot about that as a management team. We have been to several job fairs to try and build that new generation of public sector employees. So we've actually attended about 5 or 6 in just the last couple months, heading into the summer semester. Some fairs were specifically for internships, some are job fairs, but we advertise our internships there. As you remember, you increased the salary for our internship program, and we've gotten a ton of interest. We have over 100 applications for the various departments citywide, so departments are now doing interviews, so we're gonna start placing them for the summer and fall programs. So that's something that we're really pushing, and we're just trying to grow that new generation.
It's very exciting. Out of curiosity, what venues or schools are you going to recruit? Out of curiosity.
We've been to Vanguard, UCI, Cal State Fullerton. Those are the ones I remember off the top of my head right now. So we're focusing on the local colleges because the commute for those students is the easiest.
That's awesome. And then what's NeoGov?
NeoGov is actually our online application system. So we've been using NeoGov, and most agencies use NeoGov. We've been using it for quite some years for our recruitments. But NeoGov also has various other modules. We recently implemented onboarding, which is where the applicants that have applied now get completely onboarding through electronic means. We're no longer using paper forms. They can do it from the comfort of their own home. So all of their pre-employment paperwork is now done through NeoGov's onboarding, which links to their application. So everything's already, seamless in that sense. We're also implementing Perform, which is our performance evaluation system, so we can do that now electronically. We've implemented, we have not launched it yet. We're in test mode, so we're doing it by phase, by department. So we're doing test mode. And then Learn is an online training management system, also through the NeoGov platform. So what's nice is that employees are onboarded, they're now in the system, and now we can kind of seamlessly track their evaluations, track their training, all in one system.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, and I have 2 more questions, and I'm gonna go to general comments. I'm next gonna go to development services. Again, thanks to Don going on that KPI. I've been looking through that as he was speaking. One of the ones I thought that was pretty positive, at least in my opinion, was that we're trying to go down from 30 minutes wait time to 7 minutes wait time for planning. Can you share just some strategies we're going to do to, drastically reduce that time?
Yeah, I'll try to help out a little bit with that question and let Dan also respond. He's been mostly in charge of the TESA project, and that's really been where our service improvements are going to fall from. So, but with that, maybe Dan, you can respond to that a little bit.
So the wait times have actually dropped substantially just from launching TESA. The phone calls have gone up, so we've redistributed staff to be more effective. Before we'd have counter planners handling everything that came in that day. Now we're dividing that work up, siloing that work to make sure that there's always a planner next to a phone, there's always a planner at the counter. We have our appointment management software that helps us know when people that already have a scheduled appointment are showing up, so they're not waiting at all. And now walk-ins get pretty quick service because of that, and then just knowing that they're coming in through Tessa.
We've also broken the department up into 3 groups of planners. So we have a actual group that's focused on customer service specifically. So we have some staff that really just primarily do that.
That's awesome. I think it's always important to make sure we prioritize customer service for our residents. Next question I have is off of the new document that's new to me. So maybe Lorianne or someone else can answer that for me. But I have a question on the goal for housing. So one of the strategies we've added in highlighted yellow is establishing a housing division to address homeless services and additional housing. I'm just curious, where staff going to come from this? What's the ultimate goal with that new division being created?
I'll respond to that. That's something that was on the consultant's draft plan that I didn't have any notes for, and I didn't remember that coming up in the meeting. And so it's not included in our work plan. We just adopted the budget. We don't have a housing division per se. It may be something that we can consider in the future. I think we have the affordable housing ordinance. We have other housing programs that we'll be implementing over time. I think for the time being, we have the advanced planning division, which is going to be doing a lot of the work on the plans and the zoning code updates and the general plan amendments and the housing element implementation that will help get us to that point. But we didn't include that in this, the work plan that we put together because I couldn't track back to that having been something that you all had consensus on.
Well, I remember, I didn't bring up anything about a division, so it might have been you brought it up?
Yeah, no,
Maybe Jeff brought it up,
that
so
was
you want to talk about that?
Yeah, no, it was definitely on one of my sticky notes, and I know I've brought up the idea of devoting staff to housing and these issues in particular previous to the strategic planning sessions. So I was hoping we would be able to incorporate that in our budget discussions. Obviously, that's not the case now, but I still think that's an important thing for us to consider.
Well, given the nature of how casual this is, Jeff, do you want to explain what your vision is, if briefly, or you can do it?
Well, I mean, just talking in terms of housing, it seems we've identified it as one of our weakest areas. We've done some good work with our Affordable Housing Trust and our Affordable Housing Ordinance, which we have yet to finalize. But we also should be working very proactively in trying to get staff to identify staff to work with property owners, developers, try and find opportunities, work with affordable housing developers in particular. It's a different skill set than just planning, and it's not something that is unusual to cities. I mean, there are others that do have these kinds of divisions with people dedicated to that.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing that I definitely put a sticky note on and talked about was having a housing committee. And I know that these plans kind of take on a life of their own. I will be discussing that more, and what I talked about at the session was having a committee that's composed of council members, planning commissioners, and members of the public, and just to be a little bit more innovative about how we address housing, which I think we do have consensus, and it's in the staff report that it's our weakness. We put it in the SWOT analysis, and so I'd like to see that at least in the strategic plan for the purpose of a placeholder, so that no one says to me later, "Oh no, Mayor, you can't develop that project because it's not in the plan." I will note on housing, and then I'll we could talk about everything else, is it is our weakness. It is identified once again as a priority, but I don't see anything, notwithstanding that our one of our core values is innovation. I don't see anything new that emerged out of the, if I look at all the different things under housing, I see a number of things. It's one page of line items, but I don't see anything new. So this idea of a committee is an opportunity to talk about innovations and things that we can do new or not do, whatever. And so I'd like to keep that discussion open.
Thank you guys for elaborating on that one. And it's good to see that we're trying to address housing. I do think it's an area of focus for us. I don't want to weigh in too much into specifics. I think this is a high-level document, but I think to the extent that we can prioritize that moving forward, and I think we are, we see it in our budget and we see it in our actions, I think the better. But I think the biggest issue I hear in my district is people can't afford to pay their rent and growingly can't afford to pay their mortgages. So I think that focus is key. With that, I'll just go quickly on a few things I want to highlight from the document. One, I'm really happy that we're going to be doing internal assessments on our own facilities and our parks. I'm always thinking about how we can routinely update our parks, and I think this could be a good way for us to kind of automate that system and create a system to really invest in our parks consistently and methodically. With cost recovery, I think, again, looking at key things like fees, I think would address, but also maybe TOT, not this year, but maybe a couple years from now, and seeing if there's appetite for us to address that and be more at par with our neighbors. On customer service, again, I'm happy that we have Tesla. I'm happy that we're trying to pivot towards transparency in our CIP projects, because those are most common things I get asked about from residents is, when are parks going to get addressed, when are things going to get focused on. And I do want to focus a little bit on climate resiliency just one last time. I know it was pretty, I don't want to say harsh, but I was pretty critical about how much we have not been putting effort and funding into that pillar of ours. And I do want to see us, again, focusing really on four things if we can as a city. One is focusing on more EV stations. It's really unfair for renters who don't own their property that they don't have easy access to EV charging stations, and it actually is a barrier for folks to get into EVs that are probably cheaper than the long run because gas always goes up. With that in mind, I do want us to look again at CCEs if there's enough consistency on the council, because again, I think the fact that we can save our businesses money by joining a CCE and residents money on electricity by joining a CCE is attractive and appealing to me. I appreciate the fact that we're still investing in our urban forest and really prioritizing canopy cover versus just planting trees. So I'm happy to see us still investing in that. And then I do want to see us at some point finalize a climate action and an adaptation plan. I think that will be critical for us in a lot of things we want to do. And yeah, overall, I appreciate staff's work on this. Generally, I feel like these are good representations of our goals and priorities. And I want to thank you guys for your work.
Andrea?
So help me understand what a housing committee is going to do that isn't about Fairview, rezoning Measure K sites, or affordable housing.
Well, there's a lot of things. It's a lot of different innovations that occur in other cities that they could consider in adopting them. But I think that I'm thinking about things like incentives for development, looking at our development fees and to see if we should relook at that. Look at things like, in terms of incentives, things like parking minimums that we've talked about. Any number. Look at, all of the different innovations and initiatives that have been done like in San Diego. I mean, I don't have a full list of things, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to be on the committee. So there's a lot of things that are going to be happening in other cities, a lot of things that are in the literature that they could dig into and present to us. What I see us doing now is we have a list of, but I mean, by the way, I don't want this to be my only hearing on this, because I appreciate your question, and I'll be more prepared to to answer it when this initiative is brought up, but, you know, I see what's on page 5 of 8, and it's pretty much everything that we were doing before the study session or the planning session. And I think there must be something out there that we're not doing that we could be doing, because I mean, the proof is in the pudding. For years, we, of course, because of Measure Y, we didn't get a lot of interest in development. Now Measure K was initiated, and we're still not getting a lot of people coming to us. And I know part of that is because we haven't done our zoning, but I think there are other things that we could consider. So that's it. And also, it's a matter of just engaging the public, and also as part of collaboration between council members and planning commissioners and coming up with some ideas. So that's it. But that's all I have now, but I want to be able to at least have the opportunity at some point in time to present it in, you know, more thoughtfully, including in writing.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess I'm just, you know, Fairview and the Measure K sites alone are fairly ginormous lifts, and I just don't want anything to distract from those. We're already on a pretty long timeline for the Measure K rezoning sites, and like at this rate, won't be on the dais, and we'll have even more gray hair by the time we've actually rezoned anything. Okay, for staff, can you explain what implement state codes relating to sustainable practices for housing element implementation on slide 13 means? Under advanced environmental sustainability. I'm sorry, I'm using the slides and not the document. I think they're the same. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a number of, it's all of the different changes to state government code or state statute that relates to climate resiliency, climate adaptation. It's a whole series of legislation that we need to implement to make sure that we're in compliance.
Okay, can we maybe, I think when you and I have talked about this in the past, we've talked about both state codes and REACH codes. So codes that cities can adopt that are not actually part of the annual state or the quadrennial state code cycle. Was that part of the intent here too?
No, I believe it was just pretty much the ones that were recently entered into legislation that we have to actually implement. But we can put together a list to make sure that we're on the same page.
Okay. Yeah, I think when we've had this conversation, we've been referring to both state codes and REACH codes.
Okay. You can take a look.
Thank you. And then also on environmental sustainability, I do know Councilmember Reynolds has agendized a discussion of joining Orange County Power Authority. We had previously set aside both budget and considered it part of one of our strategic planning goals to at least investigate joining the CCA. And so I echo Councilmember Chavez's request to add that, if not as a goal, at least as a near-term discussion, given the agenda item that Councilmember Reynolds has asked for. On customer service, when we talk about developing thorough community outreach, engagement policies, and protocols across all departments, that does feel very broad. I think we had talked about prioritizing responsiveness specifically and methods by which individuals can prioritize responsiveness. I know from a council perspective, we've talked about, certainly we reach out to department heads often, but like who under a department head is sort of appropriate for council to be reaching out and bugging, and what is the response time for council and the public. I think we talked about sort of setting, I'd said responsiveness already, but like setting expectations for the public on like what responsiveness looks like, whether it's within TESA or not. So I want to like hone that, develop thorough community outreach and engagement policies to like specifically be targeting responsiveness is how I interpreted the discussion at the strategy session. And certainly any of the other council members tell me if I'm wrong or if there's something else that you think should be a highlight there, but that is written very broadly as it stands right now.
Agreed, and I think we did it that way because I think for each department, it might be just a little bit different, and we wanted to be able to really get detailed by department.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so.
That's totally fair. I mean, certainly for parks, it's going to look different than planning.
Right.
So, okay.
Police, fire, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's one other comment on outstanding customer service. Oh, I don't expect this to show up on the strategic plan document as a goal, but I think one of the things that I certainly spent a lot of time talking to Kendall about, and I believe she prefaced some of our discussion in person with, was this notion of like, what are the expectations for members of the city council and how they engage, in part to be responsive, but also in part so that we're not stepping on the city manager's toes, that we're very clear about our roles. I think most of us have been up here together for a while, but there is an election coming. And so to the extent we can continue reiterating the role of council versus the role of the city manager, we are ultimately a board of directors, for example, right? I'm not directing Raja to fix my street. It would be helpful, I think, to keep enforcing those norms, stating those norms, the beginning of this document, perhaps, because I don't think that we've got them like articulated in a way that is sort of impressionable on new council members and on the public. Is that clear? Okay. That's it. Thank you.
So I had some of the same points that Andrea had about having that. I do distinctly remember that discussion that we had about setting and publishing responsiveness metrics. That was, I think, a good amount of our discussion from the staff, sort of the city council level, in terms of doing something different than what we had before. Because, I mean, a lot of this stuff does carry over. So what I'd like to see is, and I think this is really just reiterating some of what Andrea just said, is for each department, and it's fine, whatever you're comfortable with, but set the different expectations, publish them, and then we can be accountable to that. And I include, by the way, the city council. So, if somebody sends an email to us, how quickly are we going to respond? If somebody has a phone call, is the expectation that we do respond or don't respond? What do we do with that? Now, I know that you've said, Lorianne, that you are drilling down on that and we're working on that and so forth and so on with the various metrics. But in terms of like what the next step is here, I really think that getting that work done is really important before we lock down this plan. And so however long it takes us, one of the things that struck me in the what do you call it, one of the slides, if I'm not mistaken, and I thought that this was, this is sensible, given that we just finished a budget. And there was no real practical way for us to do this work between the time we had our session and the time of this current budget. But it says, proposed changes to metrics, if any, are recommended to be conducted during the next budget cycle or during the mid-year. And, everybody has it on page 15. So, I mean, even if we need to take some time with this, I'm not suggesting that it needs to be done by the next meeting or whenever. I've got no particular timeline, but I think that that's really important to the work that we did at the strategic planning session. And then not only in terms of response time, but, and I know that this is, I think, part of your comments, Lorianne, but things like when we talk about housing, are we looking for, or is it even realistic to say we want to change the vacancy rate We want to have our housing be more affordable. And maybe that's a long-term plan. Maybe we say over the next 5 years, we'd like to see the affordability improve. Maybe we have no control over it, I don't know. But one of the things that occurred to me is, we have devote a lot of time and money to homelessness. And so when we get a point in time count and it says this is what we see, because I don't think we really have a metric pertaining to homelessness, we can't say whether we hit the target or missed the target, by how much. Like for example, I'm very proud when I say that we've housed in the last 5 years 362 people. I'm proud of that. But is that, should we have housed 420, or, was our goal to house 280? If we don't have a metric, if we're not shooting for a goal, and I've heard this from numerous council members, by the way, this is not something that I'm creating here. I'm very derivative of comments I've heard from Don and Andrea, is if we don't have a goal we're shooting for, we can't say, we set out 5 years ago to house 260 people, and we housed 362 people, right? We set out 2 years ago to have X amount of crime, or whatever the number is, and we hit that goal or we missed that goal, and how can we do it? If we don't have those types of benchmarks embedded in our strategic plan, then really we're not ready, I don't think, to lock it down and vote on it. And like I said, let's take our time and do it. We've got however long to do it, but let's keep that open, is my view, until we're ready to make those commitments and make those policy decisions at the city council working with staff, because those are policy decisions, those goals.
So, John, can I jump in here for a second?
Sure.
So I think there's sort of two things going on. So one is we keep saying metrics, but I think what we really mean are targets or goals. So we want a number that we're shooting for. And then I think some of these that is a thing that we can establish, and I think it's probably appropriate for staff to take the first pass at it. Some of it, the goal is get it done, do the thing, right? So, I mean, city manager, it might be helpful. You can take the document you've created that was part of the staff report, and for the ones that don't have a target, okay, that's a blank box, that's a gray box. But for the ones where we can establish some kind of goal setting, then, let's throw something out there. Maybe it's less than what we did last year, now that we have all of those numbers out there. That's going to change depending on what the thing is, but I think that's probably the best place to start, right?
I think, I've been doing quite a bit of thinking about this because you're right in that we're using certain terms interchangeably. We're using metrics, goals, KPIs, benchmarks interchangeably. And I feel like the data falls into 3 different categories. There are specific areas where we need to be able to measure if we're being responsive, like in the community in the customer service. Are we being responsive? Are we being timely, et cetera? That's a performance metric for sure. But then in the area, let's say in PD, that's more data that we need to track because it's federally required, and it's a workload indicator, which is entirely different. There's no amount of crime that is great, and whether the crime is up or down, we can use that data to inform perhaps staffing, perhaps trends at the day-to-day operational level, but that's not something that's a performance indicator per se, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing we should probably do is take the sheet where we have the performance measures and workload indicators and separate the 2 categories from each other. And then where there are areas where we need to create new performance metrics, then create the new performance metrics, whether they be number of housing units that are zoned for, or anything that pertains to the housing element that we think would be good metrics, then we could add those.
But, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. I think that's the difference for me, is like, I care less about tracking the number of housing units that are zoned and more about, like, let's set a target that we want 100 new units of housing in a year, so that we could
Got it.
work backwards to say, well, it looks like we're only on track for
Okay.
20, something's not going right,
Right.
right? I think some of this is like, I don't want you to put a lot of effort into tracking stuff just to track it. I would rather spend the time on council and staff thinking about like, what should our goal even be? Like, what is a good number and how do we compare that to?
There's a mix of things, aren't there? I mean, there's a goal and then there's tracking it. I mean, it's both, right?
Yeah,
Right,
totally.
from year to year and further out.
Can I add another wrinkle to all of that?
No, I've got it figured out right
You
now.
have
I wanna
you have
say.
the floor to add a wrinkle.
Thank you. No, I agree, Lori, and I think that the distinction between performance measures and workload indicators needs to be made. Performance, to my mind, is tied to a specific goal, and workload indicators is more about operations. And that, to me, is kind of what has really been the disconnect between the strategic plan and these, let's just call it attachment 2, because attachment 2, all of these are departmental operations. They're not necessarily city performance relative to council goals. So I would say that these performance measures, maybe that's a completely separate exercise, how we're measuring and evaluating departments. But to my mind, supporting council goals is got to be collaborative and integrated. So for example, if we were to have a goal of, or metric of saying, what's the percentage of unhoused in our community, as that varies by year to year. Whether or not that goes up or down could be the result of work by our homeless services and our planning department and our finance department. So all of these departments are involved in that. It's not limited to one. So my suggestion is to put attachment 2 separate, and I would add to that, identify what are, if we're talking about departmental operations and performance, what are the 4 or 5 that actually show performance? A number of these just seem to be things that we have the data for, so we're going to pull it out and put it in the table. And I think, as was commented by the public, there's not the context to understand why that's important. So to me, this is a completely separate piece of it. I think it would be valuable to actually identify some specific metrics for each goal, 3 or 4, and then figure out what that actually means for us. I mean, that's a whole separate exercise.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Maybe
And
let's start with like one.
Yeah, I
and
think-
then we
yeah, I
can
mean-
get to 3 or 4.
Well, and that's true. I mean,
Well, look, we have from the consultants, metrics here under housing. We have percentage of new housing units by category, percentage of total housing units by category, and percentage of unhoused residents. I mean, those were 3 simple metrics I think we could track, if we agree that's what we want.
Can I say one
But
thing?
I think,
Oh, sorry. Hold on. Say one thing. Just
yeah, go ahead, Don.
I just want to say it a different way than Jeff said it, is that the performance indicators drive behavior and performance. The workload indicators help you assess workload, infrastructure, staffing. So that's kind of that's my definition. That would be my definition, if that helps.
yes, it can.
We agree.
Right, and sometimes it's just statutorily required as well, but yes.
That's fine, but
yes,
we're
agreed.
not trying to do that right
No,
now.
but that is performance. So I just want to, there's a couple of things I think we need to keep in mind. One, the bulk of the work that staff is doing every day, if we receive no new goals, nothing visionary, nothing creative, nothing cutting edge, there's a good body of it that is statutorily required. It's just the nature and business of a municipal corporation. It has to be done, right? And so we have to track those things. Then on top of that, there's the indicators that tell us, okay, are we doing a good job? Are things getting worse? Are things getting better, et cetera? I'm very concerned about us creating performance metrics, especially if we're calling them performance metrics for things that we cannot control. Right. And so percentage of unhoused residents, that's not something that I would recommend be a metric because we have zero control over that. Now, what we do have control over is how close are we getting to the 11,760 RENA units that we know is in our housing element and that the state has mandated that we start planning for. That, absolutely. And so every year we can tell you we're 1,000 in, we're 10% in, we're 50% in, we're 60% in, right? And at some point, we would have planned for 100 or 110% of that. I think that's fair, that's reasonable, that's trackable, that's completely within our control. Some of the other performance metrics that were offered by the consultant, like in the area of finance, increase in sales tax. We have no control over that. That would not be a metric that we would,
Not a metric, it's not a performance metric.
it's not a performance
I
metric
agree.
either, agreed.
I think
And
Jeff and I
so-
were just trying to define, to separate it out, because it's,
Yes.
right now they're all mixed
Yes.
together, and it's hard to kind of get your head around.
So I think we can parse this out. I would not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I do think that there are performance measures in here that are very much aligned with the work that we're doing in the departments. The departments don't exist in a vacuum. They're consistent with not just what's required for us to do legally, but also your objectives and your goals, because we've been working on that for the last 5 years, right? In this iterative process of refreshing the strategic plan, taking everything to the next level, taking ballot measures and actually working them in, bringing projects here, especially on the housing side for your approval, and starting to whittle away at the 11,760 units as we talk about housing. But I am very much concerned about metrics that we do not have the primary control over, because I don't think that that would be a good, it's data. If we put it in the data column for us to track, like the point in time count is important, right? Is homelessness getting worse despite the fact that we're investing $3 to $4 million a year into it? That's important information for decision-making purposes, but it's not a performance metric. So hopefully that makes sense.
Look, I'm more than comfortable with staff taking the next pass at this, and I do want to just zoom out for a second to your point, Lorianne. I mean, we didn't have a document this comprehensive when I was elected. It was very unclear what our goals were. We didn't have the IT software to even be collecting half of the data. It's been a journey to get here, and so I don't want this discussion to make it sound like we're not, I'm not pleased with the progress that we've made. I think it's just, this is the next step, right? We've got some of the systems in place. We've got the things that we want to achieve. We've got the numbers, I think probably for, I don't know, when we include some of this in the budget, but now the next thing is to link this all together for action. So I'm more than comfortable with staff taking the next pass at recommendations.
Well, I think, I agree with what Andrea just said, is we've made a ton of progress. I remember, I'm going to give this, because it was a good line, I'm going to give Arliss credit for this. In 2019, we did our thing, and she says she couldn't figure out whether it was the 2019 goals or 2019 goals. And because we had, and if you have so many goals, then you have no goals. But, I remember a president that was, when I was born, he had a goal of getting to the moon by 1969. So we made it to the moon. We walked on the moon. And that was the goal. And he said, we're going to go to the moon. So that required a lot of people to do a lot of things at the federal level. That required people to raise money and allocate money and appropriate money. And then, of course, NASA got involved. And I don't even know what all they did, but I guarantee they had a lot of performance metrics. And lo and behold, we walked on the moon. So what I think we're entitled to do is over time, come up with our own moonshots. I mean, we were elected, duly elected, some of us in 2020, some of us in 2018, 2022, and whatever. And we will make adjustments over time. The thing that I don't think it's fair for us to do is to treat this like, wallpaper on top of wallpaper and say, oh yeah, the moonshots that we want, but now we want to go to Mars and we're still working on going to the moon. We have to make adjustments. So one of the things I find that's, interesting about this is we now have we started with 5 goals and we get 6 goals and we get 7 goals, and it's kind of goal creep, I think we do have to adjust priorities. And I do believe too that in 2024, our priority is housing. So that's our moonshot. So anything that pertains to housing, and the one thing I'll last say, and I will close it out because I know people want to probably adjourn, is I do push back a little bit on the idea, we have the goal. It's 11,760. It was imposed on us by some other governmental agency, SCAG or the state of California or whatever it is. I do think we owe it to our community to determine, where is the moon for us and what is our goal? And I'm not concerned, and maybe Kim is about ready to strangle me right now, but I'm not concerned that we're going to get sued by anybody if we're making this effort and we're saying it's a huge, important thing to us. Nobody's going to sue us. We're trying to achieve our goal. So I would encourage us to focus on that and work on those things and shuffle our priorities from time to time as the electeds see fit. I don't have anything else.
You're good, Mr. Mayor. I have no issues.
Okay, good, thanks. Thanks, you got my back. Thank you, Kim. Okay, can we adjourn? Oh, Arliss, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Jeff, did you get your comments? Oh, wow, okay. All right. I appreciate all the discussion. I've been sort of trying to organize my thoughts. I've got some very specific things that I think maybe I'll just put in an email. I'll try to go through them sort of generally, but I want to start maybe where the discussion has been. I had a lot of similar thoughts to my colleagues here on kind of really thinking about what are the whatever we're calling them now, goals, or really for me, it's the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, right? Like what are the things that if we accomplish, we're going to say, we did our job as council, we're really, and staff, right? Like we're really happy with what we accomplished, and what should we be shooting for in terms of those accomplishments at the end of 1 year, what might take 5 years, but really kind of nailing down those anchors to align kind of the why we're doing what we're doing, right? What are the outcomes? And we've heard a number of them mentioned here. I do think that there's a lot of value in creating some specific outcomes around housing, whether it's probably number of units, but also percentage of population that's rent burdened, right? That's something that we're really trying to address. I think that's been driving a lot of our work. On the transportation side, we've talked about ideally getting to zero in terms of injuries on our streets. So like those are the outcomes that I think it would be helpful to put on paper as to what we're driving towards. I think that helps, with the shared understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. I think it helps align the work, especially when a lot of the work is cross-departmental, in really understanding what we're trying to accomplish. And it helps us measure or assess, like, are we on track, or did we get there? So certainly agree with that, and I've got some ideas that I'll share on what some of those sort of outcome-based goals might be. The plan that we have in front of us, it feels, I agree with the comments also on, a really good structure that we're getting in place. It feels to me maybe like I hope nobody gets offended by this, like a teenager going through maturity. Like we're sort of like, it's a work plan turning into a strategic plan. It feels, sort of half work plan, like here's the things we're doing this year, here's when, which is very, very helpful and important information, but it's not all the things we're doing, and I don't think it should be, because that would be a lot of work to put together. But I feel like it's not quite reflecting the strategy and the goals that we're trying to accomplish. I think in terms of a strategic plan, this could probably actually be like shorter and more focused on what those strategic outcomes that we're doing, independent of like the everyday things, right? I think anything that's like statutorily required, if I said that right, ongoing work that we do every year, that's not strategy, right? That doesn't necessarily need to be in here. And so I'm sharing that because I feel like there's some things I'd like to be more specific, but it's really work plan based. Or there's some things that are missing, but I don't think they should be in here. There's some strategic things in here that I think need to be more specific. Let's try to give an example of that. Councilmember Chavez brought up the tree cover, right? I think we have listed enhance the city's parkway tree planting program. It's like, okay, like what does that mean, right? Like how do we know if we did that? Is it enhanced because we have a great marketing program about it? Is it enhanced because we planted 10 trees or 100 trees, right? Like I think a more specific sort of strategic based goal, and some of the stuff we've discussed is, what percentage of neighborhoods have reached the 30% tree cover threshold, right? That's something that's very measurable. I think we have the data now to measure that, Google Maps or something, right? And that's actually getting at what we're trying to accomplish. We're not just trying to enhance a program we have, we're trying to accomplish tree cover in all of our communities. So that's what I mean when I'm looking at some of these and saying, like, this really needs to be more specific, so that we all have a shared understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And again, we can measure that. And I think that's an example that should be fairly straightforward in terms of measuring. Okay. I just have to add to the earlier discussion, another example of kind of indicators versus outcomes. Councilmember Chavez brought up the data on injury traffic collisions. I had highlighted this also, right? So this is an example of like what we're seeing, not what we're driving towards, because we're showing an increase from 2022 to 2023. Obviously, we don't want that, right? Like our goal should be not getting 553 to 636. Our goal should be, how do we get that number down, right? And we have a lot of work in process, but really connecting to, how might we reduce that by 50% in the next 2 years? I think that would be something worth striving towards. I also want to share that I'm very, sensitive to being accurate in our data. I did have some of the data on hand from the e-bike ordinance discussions, did a really quick check, and based on the data I have, I don't think bikes are attributable to that 100 increase. So I want us to be just very careful about when we're making assertions that are not necessarily data-based. And I think I just want to put on the record that the data I see does not indicate that that's the reason for the increase in injury collisions. So let's be careful about how we message on that. So I don't know, those are some of the general comments. Maybe I'll just share what I thought might be on here that isn't. Yeah, I'll skip some of these questions. So within the enhance the city's infrastructure, facilities, equipment, and technology goal, we had talked during the budget discussions about sidewalk assessments and also bus shelter assessments. If those are not explicitly part of this, should they be? I just want to confirm that that work is actually going to happen. This is just a note, I do think it would be very helpful in thinking of this as a work plan for any of the work that is grant funded with specific deadlines. I do think it would be helpful to, to note in there, like, must be completed by. I know we have a number of projects that they're. Okay. So in the diversify and stabilize housing, we have an item that says conduct the citywide visioning, make updates to the general plan, and that the target date is September 2024 through completion. So like, this is something that I think, and I've heard other council members ask for this, is like, we need to be much more specific about how we're implementing the housing element programs. We've got, I don't know, 47, 49, something on that order of housing element programs, many of which did come through a public engagement process and strategic planning process on like, how do we meet this number, 11,760, whatever it is. I do think that we need as council, that the public needs, that our housing developers need a more clear, transparent schedule about how we're working through those programs. And that's, it's a lot of work. And we need to know when that work is happening and the resources we can provide to help make that happen, and how to stay out of the way to help make that happen, right? And so this is an area that I think needs many more specifics. I had thought we had, maybe a question for the city manager, do we have a plan for a study session on that, or what is the plan to get us more specifics on?
July.
Okay, so that's coming. So that's, I think that's for me, a hole that needs to be filled in. And I'll just note on the, I had previously expressed concern and disagreement with the idea of a separate committee that might come up with some additional ideas. I think we need to be very careful about how we're using our planning staff time this year. We've got a lot of good programs, I think many of which cover some of the ideas that the mayor shared. I think we really need to focus on like getting those moving before we're putting staff time on, possibly other ideas. If we do think that there are other ideas that are worth bringing to the table, I would prefer that to come in the form of study sessions with all council members involved. In the advanced environmental and sustainability section, I had also noted adding the CCA discussion here. I think there's an initial step that I've communicated to staff that I think we should get done ASAP to support kind of our assessment if that's something that we want to do. And there was one other thing that I thought might fit in this category. Maybe it's part of the, I think it's in this category that we've discussed, and that is what is our plan for mode shift in the city? So really, in reducing vehicle miles traveled in the city. It's something that's necessary. I think it would solve, kind of existing frustrations about traffic, but also absolutely necessary as a parallel process to figuring out how we're going to fit 11,760 units. And then in the last section on outstanding customer service, I think some others have mentioned this. We used to have something in our plan that I'm not sure ever happened related to a resident survey. We had talked about, a survey that would touch on maybe awareness of some of our programs, satisfaction with some of our efforts, and even sort of interests and ideas. So creating kind of a periodic resident survey. That was an idea we had before that I don't want to see die, and I think could be really valuable. And then I wanted to add, we've had some discussion on this in the past, is looking into more advanced posting or noticing of our meeting agendas. So I'll stop there. Those were some of the things that I thought were missing, and I'll send some more specific questions looking for. I'll send some more specific questions separately.
Thank you. So I'd like to reiterate what we've talked about just to make sure that staff is clear on the deliverables, and also wanted to know if you want us to separate any aspects of this. So for example, there are some things that you mentioned this evening that are directly related to the work plan, things that we should add to the work plan, the CCA. You all can, when we bring it back, make a decision regarding whether there's a housing committee or not, et cetera. We could add that. We could add those recommendations, bring that back to you for a vote, while on a parallel track, we work on the performance indicators. Well, separately, that might take a little bit more time. Not as much the customer service specifics by department, that's one piece, but some of the other things that we talked about that could be good performance indicators for the goals. And so do you want it to come all together? Or do you want to approve the work plan first, knowing that we're working on segregating metrics from workload indicators, from other performance metrics? That's a different exercise entirely, and that could hold up the approval of the plan. We're good either way, whatever it is that you decide.
My first reaction is I don't think it matters personally. It sounds more efficient if we do it together.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not like you're going to not work on any of these things because we haven't approved the strategic plan. I think staff's knee deep in most of these things already.
Yeah. Neck.
Yeah, neck deep, overhead.
This is good. Okay. And then I think the one last just point of feedback. I think we talked a lot about sort of the moonshots. I like that terminology, Mayor, because I think it's big, it's bold, it's like higher level desired outcomes that aren't necessarily even, it's smaller than the goal, but not as tactical as an objective. But we didn't really discuss that at the retreat. We didn't have that conversation. So I wouldn't dare to put that. I don't pretend to know all of what your vision is with all that.
Yeah, and I'm not being critical. I wasn't expecting it to be there. But
And maybe that, we talk about that when we bring it back. Sort of those those more high-level goals, like, like zero collisions, right? So something like, but we would all have the shared understanding that that's a high-level goal. We're not going to be, so someone's performance evaluation is not going to be, namely mine. Right, because there were traffic collisions. It's visionary. It's helping to drive all the little things that happen, but it's not as detailed as an objective. And so, okay, I think
Yeah, and
we're clear.
Mayor, if I may, I might suggest, if council members want to, that we should maybe share some of those ideas. Maybe we share them with staff. It may be a more efficient process. I think staff's heard some, but we probably all have a short list of, what would be those sort of moonshot goals that we have. It may be helpful if we share those with you. I think we did talk about some. One I recall was the 15-minute city, right? So we're, as we go through this rezoning process, can we shoot to plan so that everyone has maybe there was a disagreement, is it a 10-minute walk or a 15-minute walk to a park, right? But like, I would put that in the category of the kind of measurable moonshot goal. So anyways, I'll share the short list. I think we should encourage everyone to share some of those goals.
Lauren?
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of conclude. There's been a very robust discussion here, and I don't want to beat this up. So this is what I want to say. In looking at this, I think parts of it are very comprehensive. And I really liked the performance measures and workload indicators. It's, for the most part, if it's not black and white, it's very explainable when asked about. And there is no, if we have a hard time interpreting it, it can easily be explained. But when we go into the strategic plan, like has already been mentioned, there's some areas I think that we could just maybe move what our intentions are, find out what the statistics are, and just move them into what it is in part 2 of this. And just to give an example, late 2024, work with the city manager and police chief to finalize hiring incentives for lateral police officers. When we go and define that, I think it's already been asked, what are those goals and what are we trying to do, and how many people, and is it gonna be a monetary incentive? What is the hiring incentive going to be? Are we going to model it after other cities? What have other cities done? What do we have in place to do something in that capacity? And then let me just get to it. Another example. When we select a consultant for, I'm on page 4 of 8 here for the strategic plan. So select a consultant for design of active transportation improvements along school routes for safe routes to school action plan. When we get to this, I think it would be very helpful to know what the safe routes to schools action plan is. If not everybody already knows, I certainly don't know where it is and what the consultants, what are our expectations of the consultant. I know that we have the objective here, but it doesn't really explain a lot. I don't want to say that it's, that there's not enough here, but when we put this in here, it would be nice to have something attached. That what is it specifically that we're going to go and look at, and what measure would make this successful? That we would indicate as a council, like a minimum objective measure to make this successful. So I'm just going to be very brief. I just want to say that I am happy with where we're at, and I think we have some more forward momentum to make. I think there's been a lot of great directives, and I look forward to seeing where this goes. So thank you. That's all I have.
So I just want to supplement my answer to Andrea's question, is because I didn't get that right, really. I kind of fouled off my answer, I think, is I don't want anybody to think that this idea of the committee, and even though I kind of said it, so that's why I think I fouled it off, is the idea is to bring all these new ideas, okay? I think that you could fairly interpret my answer to say that that's what I said. Remember what I said at the hearing, and what it came out of is my experience at TCA, my experience at OCTA, my experience even in the city of Costa Mesa, that when we bring things forward, like, for example, FDC, or like, for example, zoning is we're running it by, like we do for active transportation, where we're bringing by through an e-bike ordinance. We run through active transportation where we're doing a public works. We usually run the budget through FIPAC. We run, there's other examples where the B ordinance through, and the TNR ordinance through the animal service. We don't have that for housing. And in as much as housing is very important, I think it would be helpful to do that. And then the only other wrinkle is, like is true in all those other agencies that I participate in. And like, for example, in Newport Beach, I know for their FIPAC, they have council members on it. The difference in what we have in terms of committees now and what I had in my mind, it was we would actually have council members and planning commissioners on that committee in addition to residents. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear that I'm not necessarily saying that we would add work to the already work that we're doing, but I think we would make the work we were doing better and more thoughtful. Okay, I just want to make sure I get that on the record. Okay, thank you. Let's adjourn.